Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and our distinguished guests. Welcome to the BizAvIndia Conference 2015. My name is Seema Nair, and I represent Global Luxury Culture, and I will be your host for today. It is indeed a great pleasure and an honor to be part of this maiden BizAvIndia Conference, which is a first of its kind, focusing on business and general aviation in India. Ladies and gentlemen, it gives me immense pleasure in welcoming Mr. Rohit Kapur, President of Business Aircraft Operations Association, to give his welcome address. Please put your hands together for Mr. Rohit Kapur.
Thank you, Seema. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the first edition of the BizAvIndia Conference, which is on growth and efficiency. I would like to welcome all of you, especially our chief guest, Mr. G. Asok Kumar, who is the Joint Secretary in the Ministry of Civil Aviation. Mr. Asok Kumar, if for some of us who have been associated with him, has been looking after the general aviation and the business aviation issues in the Ministry of Civil Aviation. And I must say that if we consider somebody who's a supporter and friendly to us in the ministry, it is Mr. Asok Kumar. And a lot of issues which we find that we are resolving today wouldn't have been possible without the personal intervention of Mr. Asok Kumar. You know, he's been so accessible to us. We had to just go and meet him. He's found time from his busy schedule. He just landed this morning to attend this conference. So thank you, sir, for your time. We welcome you to this conference. The next guest I would like to introduce is our keynote speaker, Mr. Pete Bunce. Pete, thank you for being here. Pete is the president and the CEO of GAMA. As most of you know, GAMA is the General Aviation Manufacturers Association. It's a body which is formed since 1970, has about 87 members worldwide. Most of the manufacturers, service providers, engine manufacturers, almost everybody, you name it. I think 90% plus of general aviation, providers or manufacturers are associated with GAMA in some form or the other. Pete has been heading this for the almost last 10 years. I believe this is the 10th year, Pete. He's an ex-Air Force pilot, done 30 years in the Air Force. I used to fly fighters, F-15s, am I right? We thank Pete for finding time to be here. He missed his flight. He still managed to make it. So we welcome Mr. Pete Bunce here. The next guest I'd like to introduce to you is a special guest we have here is Mr. Kurt Edwards. Kurt is the Secretary General of IBAC. As most of you would know, IBAC is the International Business Aviation Council. This is the umbrella body for all the business and general aviation associations worldwide. So BAOA has been associated with IBAC now ever since we were formed. IBAC has a total of 14 members. So if you see NBAA, EBAA, the Canadian Association, the British Association, Australian Association, all are members of IBAC, including BAOA. IBAC is co-located in Montreal with the ICAO headquarters. They have been extremely supportive of our efforts. One case in point I can kind of remember is this recent issue on the retrofit of FDRs, which was bothering most of the operators. We had to make some presentations and proposals to the ministry and to DGCA about how it's done worldwide. And if IBAC and Kurt's team had not supported us, we wouldn't have got all that information. So they created a lot of documents, gave us a lot of information which we presented, and we finally managed to roll back with the support of the people in the ministry. Kurt has been the Secretary General for the last 2.5 years. Previously, he has been in FAA for 21 years. So he's an old hand, as you say, in aviation. I know his personal passion is climate change negotiations, which he has been involved in for very long. So we are very grateful for Kurt. He's just here for a day, just came to attend the conference. He leaves later tonight. Thank you for coming in, Kurt. May we have a round of applause for Kurt? As most of you know, Business Aviation Operators Association was formed in 2011. We are running 4th year. In fact, we complete our 4 years on 31st March this year. We have a total of about 77 members today. We're extremely, I think, proud of the work we've done so far. This is the first edition of when we thought the time is now right that we need to, start getting the stakeholders together in terms of getting under one roof to discuss what is happening in the industry and what the state of the industry has been. So when we started to think about what to do, the thought of the conference came in. We found that there is a void actually which exists for a specialized general and business aviation conference where industry stakeholders can get together, we can have some intelligent conversation amongst us to see what the industry is, what the opportunities are, where we are heading, what we need to do to set the course right. So one of the aims of the conference was to get all people together, and we use this as an opportunity to interact with each other. Besides this, we also want to hear your views. I know various conferences have taken place. Most of them are kind of focused on what's wrong with the industry. Really, that's been most of, in fact, Amber hasn't arrived yet and Kapil unfortunately couldn't come. So we've got, when we go for these conferences, we have our presentations ready, infrastructure issues, rules and regulations, and taxation issues. So we read them out. So we wanted to do a conference at a slightly different level. We wanted to get here, get everybody together, and in the presence of the Joint Secretary, just kind of sit down and see where the growth and the opportunities lie. I know there are challenges, and these challenges are not going to go away overnight. So let's not anybody be fooled. All right, they're going to take their time. But should we manage to surpass certain challenges, where can this industry take us? Where are the opportunities in various different segments, in operations, fractional ownership, MRO issues, helicopters, aircraft management, so many areas of helicopters which still remain unexplored by us. We have expert speakers here who are going to talk about it. So today is really going to be a session to look at growth opportunities as to how this industry can really come up. I know most of us have been hurting for the last few years. Businesses are down, but with the new government in place, we also sense that there is a new pace which is coming in from the regulators, from the ministry, and they actually want us to tell them how to set things right. So that's a positive change, and we are confident that soon enough things will start changing. And we will, but when they start changing, we need to know that where the opportunities lie, where we can all be. So that is the aim of this conference, and that's where we'd like to pitch it today. This is the brave attempt being made for the first time by BAOA with limited resources. Obviously, it couldn't have been possible without the support of certain people who I would like to acknowledge here. One is, of course, our sponsors, gold sponsors UAS, the silver sponsors BizAvIndia Aviation, Jet Aviation, and JSSI. Thank you very much for supporting us. All our key speakers who are here today, thank you very much for taking out the time and being with us. We understand you're all busy, but you all have all made an effort to be here with us. I'd also like to thank Kapil Kaul, who's not here at the moment. He had to, at the last minute, back off, but he will be there tomorrow when we have the awards. Amber Dubey, Mr. of KPMG, who's been supportive, and he's given a lot of inputs for this conference. Mr. Kanu Gohen, sitting up there, ex-DG, extremely supportive of the association and always like a father figure to us, I would say. We run to him whenever we have issues. Thank you, sir. I would also like to thank the BOA Governing Board, who have been supportive of this effort. Without them, it wouldn't have been possible. Group Captain Bali, the Secretary, Ujwal Bakshi in the background, but he's really done a lot of work, young boy coming up well. Vijay of BOA, and of course Mr. Jen Baranwal for SP Guide support. We're going to have, a little later, we're going to have a special issue of the BizAvIndia edition, which is going to be released. Thank you, all of you. We're going to now start the conference with the keynote addresses. And I would just like to say before I get off the stage that this is our first attempt. We intend to do this every year, but what we need from you is a feedback. So please, anybody who's leaving their feedback forms, please do fill it in whatever time you leave. Your feedback is extremely important for us to know what we've done right and what we've done wrong. So whatever it is, the good, the bad, the ugly, please do put it down there. So thank you very much. I hope this conference helps you. Please stay with us through the day. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Rohit Kapur. May I please now request Mr. Kurt Edwards, Director General, International Business Aviation Council, to come up and address the audience. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. Secretary Kumar, Rohit Kapur, the governing board of BAOA. I'm very much honored to be here for IBAC at the first BizAvIndia conference, and so very pleased to actually see this taking place and seeing the great attendance here. One of the things I found coming into this job is that a lot of regulators around the world don't really understand business aviation, and as I was once a regulator myself within the FAA. I realized that when I was there, the vast majority of my time and attention was focused more on commercial scheduled air transport than it was on the business aviation sector. And so having lived that experience, I know that a lot of other government officials around the world are having the same experience, and it's something that we collectively need to work on, and it's something that IBAC needs to work on and is joining forces with the member associations such as BAOA to do just that. So what Rohit asked me to do is to introduce you briefly to IBAC today. I will not take very long to do that, but just so you understand how we work together and how we support you all here in India, even though we're based over in Montreal, Canada. So we are a nonprofit trade association. We represent business aviation at the global level. Our members, we're more of a federation. Our members are national and regional business aviation associations, as Rohit explained. So, and we pretty much cover the world with those 14 members, although there are some developing ones that we're hoping to bring on board soon. In addition to the geographic diversity of our membership, we also understand and we also perceive that the model of business aviation is operationally diverse. I mean, there's no one model. You have owner-operators, you have corporate flight departments, you have fractional ownership, as Rohit mentioned, and you have on-demand charters. And so we're trying to meet the interests of all those sub-communities into one big community. And of course, there are fixed-wing aircraft, there are helicopters, so it's I think, an exciting industry to be working with. Our first kind of main mission is to represent business aviation at the International Civil Aviation Organization. IBAC is a permanent observer of ICAO activities, so whenever there's an assembly, a panel meeting, the Air Navigation Commission meets, we're always invited to be there to represent business aviation operators. So you can think of us almost like the IATA. IATA is to airlines what IBAC is to business aviation operators. Unfortunately, we're not nearly as big as IATA, so it would be nice if we could get a little bit bigger to help you out more. Within ICAO, we cover the gamut of issues: safety, security, environment, air navigation, even to facilitation, right down to airports and how airports facilitate business aircraft, how they facilitate the crew, how they facilitate incoming and outgoing passengers. Second, our mission is to cooperate with and to support our members. So Rohit just mentioned to you one issue where we provided a substantial amount of ICAO-based information to help in the discussion here within India about the flight data recorder issue. We did something similar just a few months prior to that with regard to crew visas, because there were some practices that were being developed here in India that were inconsistent with India's ICAO obligations. So helping to provide that information and support the member association is a key thing, and it's a key activity for us, and we hope to strengthen that even more through stronger and more communications in the future. Last, I want to talk about the fact that we provide a number of services to the industry, particularly when it comes to the promotion of best practices in the safety area. Many of you may have heard about this International Standard for Business Aircraft Operations, ISBAO or ISBAO. That's been around since 2002, and it was created for the industry, by the industry. IBAC, working with the member associations and operators from a broad range of them, came together to figure out how you would look at the ICAO standards and recommended practices and put those define which ones are the most appropriate for business operators, both in non-commercial and commercial aspects, and how you would put together a best practices in terms of safety type of standard that would be voluntary and that operators could follow. In 2002, it was introduced, ISBAO, and it was shortly thereafter that the safety management system concept was also integrated into the ISBAO. So now, after 14 years, we have more than 750 operators registered with ISBAO around the world. Unfortunately, I think we only have one here right now in India, and I believe I just heard that there's another that will go through an audit in early March. So I would like to see that grow. And what happens there is that once they put in place these practices in terms of how it isn't a matter of a prescriptive standard, it's performance-based. So it's not how you do something, it's what you need to do, and you choose as an operator how to do it, what makes best sense for you. And after that, there's an audit done by an accredited IBAC auditor, and then most recently, last year, in 2014, we launched a new best practices and safety program, and that got it ground handling, the International Standard for Business Aircraft Handling. This came as a result of coming requirements mainly in Europe, but this is going to happen around the world thanks to the new Annex 19 on safety management systems at ICAO, where operators are going to have to start as part of their own safety management system, assuring themselves of the safety management systems of their handlers and their vendors. So this is a coming trend, and seeing that it was coming, we worked with member associations, we worked with individual handlers, and we worked with an organization in the United States called the National Air Transportation Association, which had at that time a very specific ground handling safety standard. So we've incorporated that into ISBA, and we launched this last year as a joint project with NATA. And since July of last year, we've had record attendance at the workshops. We've had a lot of interest from handlers and fixed base operators. And I'd like today to announce a first, and this is the first conference for BAOA, but it's also a first in that we're issuing the first certificate of registration to an entity based here in India. So if I could have Brigadier Idnani come up here, please. I'd like to present the certificate of registration for ISBA, the first for SRC Aviation Private Limited. So please. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir.
Ladies and gentlemen, I dedicate this to the bone harmony between IBAC and BAO. And I'm sure that SRC Aviation will leave no stone unturned to make sure that IBAC and BAO are together till their ultimate objectives are met. Thank you.
In any case, I think my time is up here, but I just wanted to thank BAOA once again for this wonderful conference, the opportunity to be here. I'm looking forward to talking with as many of you as possible and learning about the particular challenges that you face. And I have a feeling that what I'm going to hear from you is not going to be unlike what we're hearing from other associations around the world in terms of access, in terms of onerous requirements, in terms of the wanting to be able to get to remote places, but having those difficulties because you just need to work with localities and the government to better develop an understanding for you to facilitate your growth. In any case, thank you again, and I'll hand over the microphone to the MC. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Kurt Edwards. May I now request Mr. Peter Bunce, President and CEO, General Aviation Manufacturing Association, to give us the keynote address. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much. It's an honor to be here and to be able to share the stage with my good friend Kurt, and of course the Secretary as well as Rohit, and having an opportunity to be invited here is really something that I wanted to take advantage of, because as we look at global aviation and we look at the growth, our manufacturers, as we get together as a global unit, look to India as a place that we see potential that is truly phenomenal. If we can set the conditions right for business and general aviation in India, it is just unlimited where it can go. And if we can just get some government policies right and talk about some things with infrastructure, we see actually the potential of India changing as more in some other countries that are even more regulated. Take, for instance, China. When I talk to my members, they actually look to India and say the conditions, if they can be set through government policies, can actually be more advantageous for business and general aviation. What I'd like to do for you today is just take you through very quickly the numbers from last year in production that we published that are very fresh. We just released them last week. And then we'll move from there to a study that we did about the economic contribution of business and general aviation to the U.S. economy. And then I'll finish by talking about some of the challenges. And as soon as we can get the slide up here, one of the things that I do want to point out, the GAMA membership is global. And we work very closely with IBAC and our other sister associations to be able to try to really develop and nurture this industry. But something very exciting for me is that Mahindra is my most recent manufacturer that has joined our trade association, and to have a company that not only produces, they're an original equipment manufacturer of the JIPS Aero aircraft, but also the great aerostructures capability that's available right here outside of Bangalore is something very exciting for us. So I look forward to being able to work with our board members that represent Mahindra in being able to further develop that company's ability to go ahead and keep processing. We haven't any luck with getting it working? Yeah. Okay. Is there a way to get the screens kind of off there as far as?
The issue because of which full screen is not happening. You can always go ahead with this.
Okay. Yeah, I don't think this is going to be usable in this format here. Okay. What I'll do is I'll just talk about just some of the basic numbers there, because I don't think that you'll be able to see it because it's kind of zeroed in just on the center of the screen there, and the other parts are just too small. But anyway, as we look at the fortunes of the different parts of the industry itself, from piston manufacturers, we had our piston production in the last year globally was about a 9% increase, and billings even over 10%. And that increase we attribute most to the development of the training industry that has been able to be fostered in countries outside of the U.S. and Europe. And obviously there is a great thirst for being able to train aviators for the airline industry. And as we continue to try to foster that portion of the industry, we see the piston aviation as one area in entry level that we will continue to develop. If I look at turboprops and move to that unit, turboprops have decreased since last year. Now we try to analyze why do we have a reduction in the turboprop market, and it actually was down slightly, about 6%. But turboprops were quite robust in 2013. We had a little cooling off in 2014, and that mainly was because of the agricultural aircraft. They had an extraordinary year in 2013, a lot of purchases in South America and in China. That cooled off, and then we had one of our turboprop manufacturers, Piaggio, which actually closed down a plant and moved it in Italy, which caused a little bit of perturbations into the production schedule. But the fortunes of turboprops still remain strong. We see this as a major growth area, and if you actually look at the Asian Pacific region and you look at turboprops, that's a big area of growth. In the worldwide distribution of turboprops in the last year, it raised from about 11% all the way up to about 15%, which was something very good. And it looks like I think we might have gotten the slides set, so I'm going to try to catch up here. And so I'm going to drop back to pistons. So if you look at piston production, you can see that the portion in the U.S., naturally as the U.S. economy recovers, we increase the piston proportion there. And now I'll switch and catch back up with turboprops. And turboprop production, again, down about 6.5%. But billings themselves up fairly high. Why is that? Because our billings in the turboprop sector, still the higher end aircraft, start to bring in good revenue there. So up a little bit in billings. And if you look again at that market distribution, you can see that we raised from about 14% in the Asia Pacific region up to 19%, which India is encompassed in that region, how we divide up the world. We use the Honeywell predictive model that we do for the industry, and we follow that. If we look now at jets and see the fortunes in jets, up about 6.3%. The interesting thing on jets is ever since the financial collapse in 2008, the large cabin long range aircraft have been what's sustaining the industry. But what we found in the last year is that we started to have growth in both the lights and the midsection, which is good. Now that is driven a lot by the U.S. economy, and why is that? Because infrastructure is there. If you look at over 5,000 airports in the United States and then add to it the number of airports in Canada, that infrastructure lends itself for the mids and light jets quite extensively. If you look at billings, or if you actually look at this distribution there, you can tell for the first year in many, in the light and mid jet category, you can see an increase there, which is a good bellwether for us. Large cabin long range still doing well, a stable area for actual development and everything. China has cooled off some, and that's mainly because of some of the policies of the Chinese government as far as just restricting government officials traveling on business aircraft. If you look at billings, again, very healthy and a lot of money coming in the jet sector. You look at the proportion of the distribution across the globe. The U.S. stays about the same, but there has been some growth in Europe. A lot of those aircraft were delivered last year and delivered to China. I'm sorry, delivered to Russia. And with the energy sector cooling off and all the political problems that we have right now in Russia and with Europe and the rest of the world, it'll be interesting to see what happens in the next year as far as that distribution across the globe. Now, let's look at rotorcraft and piston rotorcraft very quickly. Rotorcraft came off a very tremendous year in 2013. So 2014 down fairly significantly. Now, one of the things that's happening in rotorcraft, especially in the U.S., is that the major producer of piston rotorcraft is Robinson. And Robinson has really gone to a new turbine production. They still produce the piston aircraft, but a lot of people are buying the more reliable turbine that's out there. So we do see some changes, and that's a fairly significant reduction, about 31%. Billings off not quite as much. Now if you go to turbine helicopters, again, this part of the market driven a lot by the oil and gas industry that was really developing rapidly in 2013. 2014, now we all know the oil collapse didn't happen until the last quarter, so we'll still have to work out what kind of impact that'll have. But one of the things also that we see with rotorcraft is there'll be some new offerings from all of the major manufacturers in turbine rotorcraft, and there is a natural time when people kind of wait until the new product is being released before they go ahead and buy. One of the most interesting things that we did, and in the U.S., the Federal Aviation Administration is only reauthorized by the U.S. Congress for a certain number of year period, and this year is one that the FAA reauthorization will come in front of the Congress. So we, as Business and General Aviation, all of our collective associations got together and we did a refresh of our economic impact study. In Europe last year, EBAA did an economic impact study and they used PricewaterhouseCoopers, a very internationally well-known accounting and marketing firm. And we used the same company to be able to use a methodology that was consistent with the last time we did this about 9 years ago. And these are the numbers that they came up with. And when you look at $219 billion contribution to the U.S. economy, that is a very, very large and significant factor in our overall economic status. 1.1 million jobs directly attributable to general aviation. That's manufacturing, that's MRO facilities, FBOs, service and handling, and all of those companies that go and feed into that great industry there. So we have started to widely distribute this economic report, and one of the things that I wanted to do today is give a copy to the Joint Secretary just so that he can peruse it, and you all will have a capability also to look at it online, because it breaks it down by state and into the different disciplines we do, and then along with that we offered a compendium that actually adds color to the numbers. It starts to, and we called it the wide wings and rotors of general aviation, and it talks about different stories of large manufacturing, small ones, but also what we do in emergency medical support in the oil and gas sector, what we do in the volunteer organizations, and really try to represent how the industry goes and permeates the fabric of the U.S. economy and life in the U.S. And I hope someday that we'll be able to see that same vast development here in India. So, Mr. Joint Secretary, that's for you. Thank you. Just the last thing that I would like to touch on is now looking at the challenges. And you all know the challenges obviously much better than I do. But as we look at the challenges here in India, one of the things that is encouraging to me is as I started to talk to some of the government officials that I work with, both in Europe and in the U.S. By the way, we had 7 U.S. parliamentarians scheduled to be in our offices at GAMA today, although there's a snowstorm there, but that might be delayed. But we had the head of IASA with us last week at our board meeting, and of course we work very closely with the U.S. Trade and Development Agency as well as the U.S. Department of Transportation. And when I talk to the U.S. government officials and also the European government officials, they are all bullish on the capability to be able to grow business in general aviation here. Obviously, with the U.S. government, the recent trip by President Obama here really was to signify what we see as a change, a real change in perhaps more recognition of if you develop business and you have policies that really strive to develop the economy, that industry can be very helpful within that process. And so people within the U.S. government have told us to come back from this conference and report to them how they can start raising it on the agenda for the U.S. Department of Commerce to be able to have discussions with the government here, and obviously we have advocates, as we do with the Joint Secretary here, to be able to go and talk to the different agencies in the Indian government about how we can go and start to spur this industry and growth. Now, of course, the challenges are varied, but one thing that is always a factor is infrastructure. And when we look at the Indian infrastructure and we say, okay, airspace doesn't look like it's a problem like it is in China. You all are familiar that the People's Liberation Army really restricts the access to airspace. But unless we have a capability to use airports, whether it's slots or to have a way to get to business aviation airports, then we cannot grow this industry. One of the things in the U.S. that's astonishing to me, and it always is if you take the top 20 airports that service commercial airlines, they have no correlation at all to the top 20 airports that service business and general aviation. Zero correlation. And when you have great cities like our financial center, New York City, much like Mumbai here, when we have just ringed within easy driving distance or helicopter distance out to an airfield, you have over 20 airfields surrounding New York that we use business and general aviation on a daily basis. In fact, one of our great companies, Dassault Falcon Jet, is right there at Teterboro, right outside of New York, for that very reason. And so if you have government policies that allow access to those types of airports with very congested airspace, it's just phenomenal what you can do. You take a city like Denver and you have an airport that doesn't allow any commercial aviation. Centennial Airport only allows business aviation, and that has become such a great engine for the economy in Denver, Colorado at 6,000 plus feet in altitude that the city takes that airport very seriously in any type of planning. So infrastructure is key. Building access to airports, and where there are slots available, having government policies that encourage and actually allow, or in some cases force, an ability to provide some slots for business aviation is a smart policy because it'll help it to grow. So having MRO capability fosters then FBOs, and those FBOs foster a very healthy climate for business aviation. And if you look at when 90 to 95% of the MRO business goes outside of India for servicing the current fleet that's here, there's no reason for that. We should be able to service them in country here, which can be a great economic boon. As far as punitive tax structure, we all know if you tax something, you want less of it. If you want more of it, you tax it less. And that becomes very important when you have tax policies that hit you on every step of the process, whether you're bringing in aircraft, new aircraft or used aircraft, or you're trying to fly them. If you can adjust tax policies, you will have a positive impact on the industry. So I know that there's different federal agencies that you have to work with in the large government here in India and the bureaucracy that's created around that. But anything that we can do as the global manufacturers to be able to work those and be able to emphasize to our government to work with those agencies that do administer the taxes is something that we definitely want to do. So as we look ahead, all challenges when you go with over-regulation of industry or over-taxing of an industry starts at the top. And so that's something that we'd like to do as we work this industry from grassroots up, and just by indication of how many people are here, anything that we can do and give support to the Joint Secretary and his colleagues to be able to go and foster this industry, we definitely want to be able to do that. And so if we can align regulations, and one of the big things that we've been trying to do in the Asia-Pacific region is make governments realize that you've got to regulate business and general aviation differently than you regulate the commercial airlines. If you do that, you will help your economy and you will help this industry grow. And if we can work together on being able to figure out exactly what the asks are and put those in a coherent format that we can go and get our colleagues in the governments in Europe and in the US to be able to work it, it's something that everyone is encouraged and wants to do. So with that, I want to just go ahead and thank you for letting me be a part of this today. And if there's anything that we can have a discourse with during lunch or the rest of the time that I am here or at the show tomorrow and everything, please grab me. I'd love to talk to you about it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Peter Bunce. Moving on, may we please request Shri G. Asok Kumar, Joint Secretary, Ministry of Civil Aviation, to come up and say a few words, please. Thank you.
Mr. Rohit Kapur, Mr. Peter Bunce, Mr. Kurt Edwards, and leaders of the industry. I was listening to Peter Bunce, and he suggested that the regulators or the government should talk less and listen more. So probably that's what I should do here, and listen more than giving more speeches and get away with it. But a couple of things I'm very, very happy to be a part of this program because aviation in India, even though it's more than 100 years old, has not picked up the way it should have picked up. But now there are signs of revival, and there were signs of revival of the big aviation schedule operators. But then now it's time to probably think small. It may look very, very funny when I say it's to think small. Indian aviation had always been focusing on the schedule operators, the big planes. Probably it's time that we also now change our focus onto the small. That's why I said think small now. Not in terms of volume, but we want to think big in terms of volume, but in small in terms of size probably. Most of our regulations had been onto the looking at the schedule operators, bigger operators issues, and in that process, somewhere down the line, we have missed out what is to be looked for how we should address issues of the smaller aircrafts. Now we have realized probably our mistake, and then we are trying to focus on that issues. And a very opportune moment to be here with the President of GAMA, because of the thrust the Government of India is coming out with the Make in India campaign. The Prime Minister at the highest level almost has been telling and focusing and driving very hard on trying to make in India. As I was hearing someone remark, if India can have its rocket landing in Mars in the first attempt, we should also look at something which is down below the space. It is we could conquer the space in first attempt, but then we are still lagging behind in having the space below the space, I would say. The outer space is with us, but the space below the outer space probably we'll have to conquer. We have tremendous talent in India in the avionics sector, the software sector, and I have been interacting with many people on the ability of India and Indian companies in manufacturing small units. So it's a very opportune moment to be here with the President of GAMA, and who is very positive in looking towards India and trying to develop the manufacturing bases in India. I welcome you here to India, and I assure you the support of the ministry for any support of assistance, regulatory as well as taxation. And taxation is not in my hand, but we'll try to work it out. But definitely we will be helping to expand the manufacturing bases in India. Now, coming to the issues related to the general aviation, Rohit had very clearly said it's the same thing everywhere, the infrastructure, then regulatory and other issues. And I had been attending many of the conferences, and most of the faces are very familiar, and we keep on hearing the same issues. But I'm very happy to say that in the last 2-3 years, we have addressed a lot of issues, which I am very happy to see that they were displayed in the display board. Generally, when you do good things, nobody acknowledges. But I saw that about 7-8 good issues which we had been grappling for many years could be addressed, and then that they have acknowledged. There were issues of as I said, treating the smaller aircrafts on par with the bigger aircrafts, and many of those issues we could address. We have formed a subcommittee in the ministry, which I'm heading, and we had a lot of round of discussions on those issues. A lot of cost reduction methods have been suggested. many things have been moved out, right to a very simple issue of making payments. Earlier, 2 years back, all the operators had to carry the cash to the airport to make the payments. That has been done away with. It's a very minor thing, but then the irritation it caused for a scheduled operator pilot to carry bunch of bag of cash to the ATC tower and tell that this is our landing and parking charges. It was very bad. So we had started addressing very elemental issues and to the issues of charges or at the airport, whether it's ground handling charges, whether it's charges related to throughput for the fuel, whether it is charges related to the security issues, all has been addressed. And other issues which complicated in the last 1 year was the FAA downgrade, which we are working on that. With the new CAP 3000 fund in place, all the NSOP and the business operators had to go through a series of recheck, and that took a lot of time. There was some time when the foreign flights to the foreign countries were also we had put on hold. Now we have come over the size, probably learned a lot in the last couple of years, and addressing the safety issues. And mind you, we had India has a very good safety records. Our safety records have been good. Those issues related to the FAA downgrade has been addressed, and probably we'll be getting that revoked, and in 2-3 months' time probably we'll be back to the category 1, and that is a good sign for us. Other issues related to the FBOs and helicopters. Helicopters also we have been addressing in separate meetings on those issues. But unfortunately, the main problem in India had been a matter of perception and of optics. Aviation is considered as a rich man's preserve, and India being a democracy, we have to pander to the people. We are interested in getting probably a lot of things free, and then we have to probably appear to be very pro-poor. In that process, what has happened was a sector which can bring in a lot of revenue. As I was really impressed with the figures they had been given in the US. That segment we had missed out, but then this, as I said, the course correction is taking place, and we are trying to look at the aviation sector in a very different way as a common man's transport. We are trying to address the issues of connectivity in a big way. India is a very big country, and we have only about 93 operational airports. It's amazing because they were mentioning about 5,000 airports in US, whereas a country of a similar proportion, or probably bigger proportion, we have only about 93 operational airports. And there are places in the country where roads are not fully developed, or it takes hours to reach a place. Railway lines are not developed properly. So those places we have to fly in. So regional connectivity and connectivity to remote areas is one of the important aspects for us, and we have been working on revised route dispersal guidelines. Many of you are aware of the route dispersal guidelines, which forces the airlines to go to some of the remote areas. But the good news for all of you is that in the new, the revised route dispersal guidelines, which we have put up on the website for the comments, and probably would be finalized in a week or so, a lot of emphasis is given on smaller aircrafts. We have made the concept of domestic flying credits. These are the points earned flying with passengers to the remote areas. That's something like an RPKM. And those are made tradable, and we want the code share permitted between smaller aircrafts and the bigger scheduled aircraft, so that a crop subsidy is possible. And we are also trying to do away with the distinction between the scheduled operators and non-scheduled operators by coming in with a new term called scheduled commuter operators, where smaller aircraft will be permitted to publish their schedule, and they will be asked to fly minimum of some 5 times a month or something, and they can take over this business in these remote areas where bigger airlines cannot fly because of either infrastructure restrictions or bigger airports are needed for them, or because of the less passenger load. So this is one thing which is very, very unique concept which we have now taken up, and probably in a month's time that will be through of the tradable domestic flying credits and impetus for smaller aircrafts. So that is one major policy initiative which we have taken up. Another one is the new civil aviation policy which is there on the web, and we are now coming out with that policy which will be coming up in a probably a month's time. That also would bring in a new initiative for the scheduled operators, for the non-scheduled operators. Then other issue which I would like to tell about is the ground handling charges, which most of you people have been probably harassed a lot because of the huge charges which you have to pay for at the airport. This is also being addressed. A new ground handling policy, we would like to take this issue forward by reducing the financial burden on you, and also trying to have probably a group of non-scheduled operators or commuter operators having common maintenance space. Now, as of now, every airport, even if you have a single aircraft, you have to have the whole paraphernalia with you. That adds to your cost. So we are looking at of combining a couple of operators and having common maintenance facility. These are all will go in a long way in reducing your cost. We have taken up with the state governments for reducing the cost of aviation turbine fuel, which would be making definitely reduction in the new budget will coming up, and there is a lot of hope riding on the new budget. We have made our inputs very clearly, and we have also made it very clear that optics, you should not hide behind optics. We have to take this head on. The aviation industry to be as a part of a growth engine, not as something of elitist, not as something of a preserve of the rich and the elite. We have to take it head on as a communication means of communication, means of transport in the country. And if you want to bring India together, the vast areas of remote and far-flung areas in together, we should have a civil aviation in a big way. So that is, we are looking at it. And the last point which I would like to say is we are also looking at using electronics in a big way for passenger facilitation. The facility probably in Bangalore airport, we are doing an experiment where we are permitting people to use the electronic mobile boarding pass. I don't know whether you have used that, but we are trying to look at these issues of self-check-in, and then using electronic means for your baggage delivery and checking of baggage, and then checking of passengers and going through securities. So these are some of the ideas which I thought I can share, but I'm extremely positive that in this budget there will be a lot of relief for the MRO. MRO industry, as was the earlier speaker said, 90% of our MRO industry goes outside. We have a $750 billion industry in this country, all being taken out to neighboring countries, where infrastructure is probably half as developed as India. There's only two major airports in Colombo, but they handle most of our MRO facilities. So this is a thrust which we are coming up in this budget. And Make in India, along with Make in India, I'm sure that we will make a lot of impact in the next years to come. I'm very happy that the US government is also looking forward to cooperate with us. We will definitely want more and more business opportunities, business aviation in the country, and more and more jobs being created in this sector. Thanks a lot for inviting and listening to me, and I am all ears to listen whatever your suggestions I can take back to the ministry and probably change a little bit the way we are flying in India. Thanks a lot.
All right, we would now like to move on to the launch of the BizAvIndia magazine, the first magazine in India focusing on the general and business aviation sector. May I please have Shriji Ashok Kumar to please do the honors.
We request Mr. Jain Karanwal, the editor of and publisher of the Guide to GAMA.
Great series of thanks for support. Look forward to much more.
Thank you very much, gentlemen. We shall now break for lunch, which will be served at the pre-function area, and may we request everyone to regroup back here by about 2:30 p.m. Thank you very much. 2 o'clock? 1 hour? No? We're good with 2? Okay, sorry, apologies. Can we have everyone regroup here by 2 p.m.? Thank you.